Words and expressions commonly misused. And the Elements of Style by William Strunk. We're going to G. No, excuse me, H. All right, so he is a man who redundant expression. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. He is a man who's very ambitious. He is very ambitious. Spain is a country which I've always wanted to visit. I've always wanted to visit Spain. So these are the bad sentences. Poor writing or below average writing. This is better, much improved. He's very ambitious. You don't need to say he is a man who blank. I've always wanted to visit Spain. Just be direct. Spain is a country which I've always wanted to visit. Also, the subject performing the action. A lot of times you want to put right up front, or you want to put it. You want to vary your sentence structure, but at the same time, you want the clarity to be, up front and center. So I've always wanted to visit Spain is generally a stronger sentence than Spain is a country which I've always wanted to visit. It's just more direct. So help, see under but. I have no doubt but that, or he could not help see but that. He could not help seeing that. That makes sense. All right, so however, in the meaning nevertheless, not to come first in its sentence or clause. Okay, so let's look at this. So the roads are almost impassable, period. However, we at last succeeded in reaching camp. Not the best. And this is a much improved pair of sentences. The roads were almost impassable, period. At last, comma, however, comma, we succeeded at reaching camp. And the meaning, nevertheless, not to come first in a sentence or clause. I don't know. I definitely made these mistakes a lot then. This is something that I would staunchly disagree with. I could say the roads were almost impassable, period. However, comma, we finally succeeded in reaching camp. It'd be interesting to see, what Strunk believes about that. We eventually succeeded in reaching camp. Because I think that that's clear. But here he's saying that in the meaning, nevertheless, it's not to come first in its sentence or clause, like ever. Interesting. I must have broken that 100 times in my writing, but I never got bashed for it. Still, that's one of the great parts of learning is sometimes you're going to learn stuff that you might not use. I mean, this is probably a popular, refrain from students all over the world. When am I going to use this? Whether it's math or physics or chemistry or English, etc. But it's just the process of learning, of acquiring the acquisition of knowledge. Some of the things you're going to learn, and you're going to say, I don't agree with this, and here's why, or I would change it to this. You're going to have opinions that over time you're going to develop. But it all depends on the venue again, right? If you're a young student, you want to be very responsive to trying to perform well and trying to achieve your objectives. And when you're a young student, what's your objective? Your objective is to try to stay out of trouble, and be, be a good student, to essentially make good decisions, and that's largely your job when you're young. That's one of your main jobs if you're privileged, if you're lucky, and that's something that I always remind people. I know it doesn't always seem the case, but it's a true privilege to be able to learn, to be able to spend all day and learn. It's a true privilege. You're developing these muscles over the years that will help you tremendously in your life. But yeah, so here I disagree, but maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to hear in the comments, opinions, that, with regards to that the phrasing of however, because I think that you could say, however, comma, we finally succeeded in reaching camp, or we ended up succeeding finally, we ended up succeeding in reaching camp, period. When however comes first, it means in whatever way or to whatever extent. In whatever way, yeah, I don't agree with that. But I'm probably wrong. I mean, that's one of the things is, I majored in English, And I took a lot of film classes, business. I just took a lot of different types of classes, but I did major in English, and I did relatively well. Um, and but I make mistakes as well, and it's one of those things. It's probably like programming. A lot of programmers, people might think, oh, they're all just geniuses, and they're just disguising, the fact that they constantly have a lot to learn, but they know a lot because they've worked hard. The ones that work really really hard and work smart and prodigiously, and they get uncomfortable. You're going to get better. But sometimes I hit this, and I feel like that I'm made a lot of mistakes, but I wasn't knocked on it. I think it's interesting. But however you advise him, he will probably do as he thinks best. Okay, this makes sense. However discouraging the prospect, he never lost heart. Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. Avoid this word as a perfunctory means of introduction. Instead of announcing that what you're about to tell is interesting, make it so. An interesting story is told of blank. Tell the story without preamble. In connection with the anticipated visit of Mr. B to America, it is interesting to recall. Yeah, if you have to say the word interesting, it's probably not interesting. Um, Mr. B, who it is expected will soon visit America. I mean, I think I've used noteworthy before. I think that is a stronger word than interesting. Um, if something is of noteworthy importance with regards to the context of the essay or the essay's argument, etc. Um, but the word interesting, I totally agree. It is so overused. It's like, what does that mean? Interesting, from whose perspective? From what time frame? What, you know, to everybody, and in what context? I mean, it's just opens up a can of worms. And you also, when you're writing, you want to choose words that are clear, but also as you're writing the flow of your sentences and your paragraphs, you want to always remember, what is the reader going to be asking you? So by saying the word interesting, you're going to have to develop that in myriad ways, in multiple ways, probably. Because when you say something's interesting, it's, the reader can maybe think of 3 or 4 or 5 different ways that it's interesting. Then you got to kind of answer all 5 of those. If not, then that's kind of a demerit, kind of a strike, a little strike against you. And if you have like 10 of those, 30 of those, it's a bad essay. I mean, it just is. It's kind of hard to articulate in this video, but I'm definitely trying to put up multiple videos where we write essays from scratch. But yeah, it's really a matter of, you don't want the reader to be, you don't want to throw the reader into this like briar patch of asking you all these questions, and that's what makes interesting a negative word to include. um you could say most interesting, but again, it's still a little bit vague. um and it could beg a lot of questions from the reader. um so let's yeah so you want to just be direct, and think of other words to use. Okay, so kind of. So let's end with K, kind of. Not be used as a substitute for rather before adjectives and verbs, or except in familiar style for something like before nouns. Restricted to its literal sense. Amber is a kind of fossil resin. A kind of. I dislike that kind of notoriety. That type of. That sort of. Right? Um, it shouldn't be used for rather. He's kind of funny. He's kind of silly. This is very interesting. I think colloquially, it says in familiar style, right? Or except in familiar style. Um, I think in terms of everyday speech, we see this a lot. It's definitely something that I've done many a times. But it's saying that, and also it doesn't commit you. So as a writer, you're gonna say, oh, this is kind of funny, or this was kind. It doesn't commit you. So just even from that perspective alone of clarity, and using committal language and being direct, it's not the best phrasing. But also, Strunk is saying that it's not to be used as a substitute for rather. Um, and that you should restrict kind of to its literal sense. Amber is a kind of fossil resin, or a type of fossil resin. I dislike that kind of notoriety. I dislike that type of notoriety, that sort of notoriety. So if you can replace kind of with sort of, type of, then it works. If you're in discourse, everyday speech, I think it's fine to say, oh, he's kind of silly or funny, um, or witty, etc. But it definitely doesn't fit in academic writing. And I'd love to hear your comments below as well, talking about kind of, because I'm learning a lot. That's one of the great things about um, you know uh, learning and reading and paying attention, um, to what your brain is ingesting and digesting, and that is that you learn something new every day. I mean, it's so hokey, but it's true. You learn something new every day, and especially if you're paying attention, you're learning a lot of new stuff every day. If you're learning, um, throughout your life, um, then I learned this. I didn't realize that it should be restricted to its literal sense. All right, thank you guys very much.